Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Book 10 of his Confessions, Augustine is going to discuss how after his conversion he still faces some temptations that cause him trouble, and he's going to make use of a verse from the first letter of John to divide these into three classes. So he talks about the concupiscence of the flesh, the concupiscence of the eyes, which we've already discussed elsewhere, and then what, depending on which text we're looking at, will generally translate as the pride of life. But in Augustine's text, it's being translated a little bit differently, in part because he's working from the Latin Vulgate, where it's been, you could say, not exactly translated. And so we get here in the English the ambition of the world. So in Greek, the term is he alazonia, to biou, right? Bios is life, the life that we lead, not just being alive, but the entirety of our life. And alloxenia is a vice that sometimes is translated as vanity, but pride works just as well. It's a setting yourself above others, wanting others to acknowledge your superiority to them. And it could have been translated by superbia in Latin, but it's translated as ambitio saeculi. And saeculi, okay, that can be world, that can be age. So it's a little bit longer than a particular life, but if we understand life in a broader sense, the course of life, it all works. So we don't want to get too hung up on the language there. Augustine is going to say that what is really central to this is the wish or will, we could also translate it that way, to be feared and to be loved by other people. So timere et amare, these are two really important fundamental affectivities, right? Love of all sorts is incredibly important for Augustine. And then vele, the will on our own part. We will to have other people fear and love us. Maybe sometimes fear us without loving us, maybe sometimes love us without fearing us. And why? So we could have good reasons for that, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but he talks about for no reason but that there may come a joy, a gaudium, but this is a joy that is not really a joy. And I think what a wonderful description of the sort of hollowness that comes from this need to have other people fear you, respect you, care about you, love you, talk about you, right? And so he says, a miserable life is this, and a foul boast. Most of all, it comes that I neither love you, God, nor have a chaste fear of you. And God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble, thunders down upon the ambitions of the world, and the foundations of the mountains tremble. So does that mean that we should put aside any wish to be feared and loved? Well, not exactly. He says that by reason of certain official positions, officia, which could be also understood as duties, or appropriate actions or functions, right? It is necessary for us to both be loved and feared by men, but this opens us up to temptations. And here he talks about the adversary, he means the devil, saying, well done, well done. And he does this so that as we greedily gather up these words, we might be caught unawares, displace our joy from the truth. We should have our joy and truth together and place it among the deceptions of human beings so that it may afford us pleasure to be feared and to be loved, not because of God, but in place of God. So we can seek out this pleasure even if we're in a position where we ought to be feared and loved. So we got to be careful. You notice with Augustine, there's no blanket, oh, you're fine if you do this, you're terrible if you do this sort of thing, right? So this is a really important point that he's making. And he says that if we do this sort of thing, then we don't have a union in charity, a union in love, but comradeship in punishment, being aligned, you could say, with the devil who's being punished. And, what happens there? Well, we serve them who in a perverse and tortured way imitates God. So there's still some rulership going on, but not the good kind. And then a little bit later, he's going to say that, so we're tempted daily by different temptations. Our daily furnace is the human tongue, he says. And he says, in this way you impose continence on us, give what you command what you will. And then he says something really interesting. So, we've got the concupiscence of the flesh, we've got the concupiscence of the eyes. Augustine says, when it comes to those, I'm not perfect. Actually, I'm far from it. But at least I have a capacity for self-examination. If I'm eating too much, if I'm wasting my time in morbid curiosity, I can kind of figure that out on some level. And he says, in this, the pride of life, I hardly have any ability for self-examination. With regard to fleshly pleasures, curiosity, I perceive what extent I have attained the power of restraining my mind. When I am free of such things, either voluntarily or because they're not present, then I ask myself whether or not having them is more annoying or less annoying to me. Even riches. These are sought for the purpose of providing for one or another of these three lusts, or for two of them, or for all of them. If the mind cannot perceive distinctly whether it despises them when it possesses them, they can be rejected and it may put itself to the test. But is it easy to do that with this pride? This pride that seeks out, as he's going to talk about, praise, laus. He says, to be without any praise whatsoever and to test ourselves in this condition. How can we manage it? Do we have to change our life entirely so that nobody knows who we are or everybody thinks badly of us? What greater madness, he says, can be named or conceived than this? And why? Well, because he's concerned with this question, is praise actually a good thing? Is it maybe part of or a contributor to the good life? If that's the case, then shouldn't we want to be praised? Maybe we need praise in certain ways. Is it something that we should delight in, right? To enjoy, to have that joy that we talked about before. Augustine is going to discuss the priorities that we ought to have. And that's very much what his moral theory or his ethics is about. There are a vast variety of goods. Where we go wrong typically is not choosing something that is evil for its own sake, but choosing a lesser good instead of a higher good. So he says that what we should be delighting more in is truth rather than praise. And if you put the question to me whether I'd prefer to be a madman or a man at fault in everything and yet be praised by men, or to be steady and absolutely right in truth but reviled by all people, I see which I should choose. It doesn't mean I'll actually choose it, but I at least do see I should choose to be in truth. He says, I should not wish the approval of another man's mouth to increase my joy over any good that may be in me. But I admit, not only it does increase it, but that condemnation lessens it. If I was truly free of this temptation, that wouldn't really affect me being praised or condemned. And so what is going to be helpful for us? He goes on and he says, well, God, you have commanded on us continence, continencia, to withhold our love from certain things. So restraining our love, our desire, our taking delight in some things. And God has also prescribed justice, and justice tells us where we ought to bestow our love. So it's not merely negative, not prohibitive. It's also positive. You should be loving. Now it's going to be interesting. Who should we actually love? He says, you've willed not only that you be loved by us, but that we love our neighbor as well. And so this is going to provide us with a sort of criterion for determining whether we are seeking praise or engaging in condemnation rightly. And he says, I often, when I'm pleased by the praises of someone who clearly understands the matter, I think I'm pleased at my neighbor's progress or promise. And when I hear my neighbor condemn something he doesn't understand or that's good, I'm made sad by his wrong deed. And sometimes I'm depressed at my own praises, either when things are praised in me over which I'm displeased with myself, or when lesser or trifling goods are rated higher than they should be. How do I know whether I am thus affected because I do not like the man praising me to differ from me concerning myself, not because I'm motivated by his advantage, but because these very goods which please me and myself are sweeter to me when they please another man also, right? So I got to be careful with how I'm making sense of this, he says. And so he says, I see, God, that I ought not to be moved by praises on account of myself, but for my neighbor's good. That should be my motivation. And then notice what Augustine says. Whether that's the case, I don't actually know. I know less about myself than you do, God. Please enlighten me. Help me out here. Let me examine myself once again and more diligently. If in my own praises I am moved by the utility, the usefulness for my neighbor, why am I less moved if someone else is unjustly reviled than if it is I who am reviled? Why this self-centeredness or self-focus, right? So this is a sign to him that maybe he doesn't have this temptation completely under control. Then he's going to go on in the next two sections, and he's going to briefly examine two other modes of this temptation. So one of these is what we can call false humility, right? And he's got this framed in a very interesting way. He says that I can admit my own defects, but words coming out of people's mouths and deeds known to men contain a most perilous temptation. What is this temptation? A love of praise, which to build up a kind of private superiority, begs for and hoards up marks of approval. Even when this is rebuked within myself by myself, it affords temptation by the very fact it is rebuked. I can look at myself and say, oh, I'm so good at figuring out what's bad about myself, including this love of praise. I don't want praise. Oh, but I do want praise. But the fact that I know it makes me better than other people who don't know it. And now you're deep, deep in pride, aren't you? He goes on and he says that often out of very contempt of glory, a man derives an emptier glory. No longer does he glory in contempt of vainglory. He doesn't despise it inasmuch as he glories over it. So you can be taken in by, let's call it pride squared, pride on a yet higher level, when you're recognizing your own need to humble your pride. You can become prideful over that. Another temptation, which is not exactly along the same lines, is that of saying, well, I'm not going to take away from anybody else. I'm not going to please other people, displease them. I'm not going to care about that. I'm just going to focus on my own self. Well, that's not good. Why? Because we should care about our neighbor, because God wants us to care about our neighbor. He commands it. He loves the neighbor. We're supposed to love the neighbor as well. So he says, while these people please themselves, they are greatly displeasing to God, not only by reason of things not good that are looked on as good, but also by reason of goods belonging to you, they think to be their own. They say, I'm just going to stick with my own stuff. And by reason of things known to be your free gifts, but not rejoiced over, with brotherly love and begrudged by them to other men. So we shouldn't say, no harm, no foul, so long as I don't bother anybody else. I don't need any praise from them. I don't have to praise them myself. That's not good enough. That is another kind of pride, according to Augustine, drawing on, his sort of reflections on the Christian teachings about this problem. So you can see that this is a lot trickier, the pride of life, than these two lower kinds of concupiscence or desire. And this is also a form of desire, a desire to be feared and loved, to be praised, right? To have others praise you in the way that you want to be accorded a certain status. And so this is a very difficult temptation that Augustine admits he still has some significant problems with.